Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and the trade deadline is upon us. The Vikings are 6-2, and the kicker and the long snapper both got hurt in the same game. We have a lot to talk about, folks, and coming up shortly, Manny Hill will pick the schedule, as he always does, every Monday at 7:30. But we got to start with the Vikings, of course, win over the Indianapolis Colts. A more impressive win when you dive into the numbers beyond the score than it was watching it, which felt like, can they just finish a drive? And eventually they started to do that and end up with a win that by 8 points does not look that impressive over a pretty rough team. But when they run 71 plays to Indianapolis's 49, when they nearly double up their yardage, when they controlled the ball for 36 minutes, the Vikings did most of the things that we had been looking for a week and a half, that we had been talking about over and over again. Can they fix some of the blueprint on defense? Can they stop the run of the Indianapolis Colts? Can they stop those passes over the middle for easy completions? Can they show some confusion with the blitz? Can they cover better? Can they get to the line of scrimmage and get the snap off? And can they get the ball to Jordan Addison a little bit more? Can Sam Darnold pass on first down to move the football? They did everything that we were asking them to do in this game, except for a couple of mistakes cost them from scoring more points. A throw that was ill-advised from Sam Darnold turns into an interception, and a couple of missed kicks. And that's how close the Vikings were to a complete and utter blowout of the Indianapolis Colts in that game. So as I reviewed it and look closer at the film and look closer at the data and listen to Kevin O'Connell today out at TCO Performance Center, I come away thinking that was actually really well played by the Vikings overall. And the fumble that shouldn't have been because of a personal foul and the interceptions, that they really made things look a little bit closer and a little bit worse than they were. And the two missed kicks because Will Reichard was dealing with a quad injury. All those things were different on the final score than the actual play that was going on a play-to-play, down-to-down basis, which the Vikings overall dominated. So we'll get to everything that happened last night, and also trade deadline ideas, and whether you are back to all in now that the Vikings have gotten to 6-2. It seemed like most people jumped off that wagon last week after the Vikings lost to the Rams, or a week and a half ago, whenever it was. And now it's 6-2 with Jacksonville and Tennessee on the way. Maybe there's a better argument for the Vikings making a lot of trade calls right now. So let's begin with the kicker and the long snapper, though. Will Reichard, when he misses his first kick, you go, okay, it's bound to happen. But then when he missed his second one from 30 yards away, all right, there's something wrong here. And as the night went along, the broadcast started to show Will Reichard dealing with something that looked like a leg injury and putting a wrap on it. And he went out and continued to kick, but he just had to battle through the injury there. And now it looks like that could be more serious. Now, Kevin O'Connell could not give us a detailed, here's how many weeks he's going to be out, or if he's out at all. They're still continuing to evaluate it. Is he going to be on IR? Do they have to get another kicker? It sounded like they were still working through what this injury is going to look like for Will Reichard. But if he's not able to play for the coming weeks going forward, whatever it might be, then they will have to go out and find somebody else to come kick for them. There are a lot of teams this year who have had bounce around kickers. I think the Giants are on a couple kickers. Greg Joseph has been hurt. San Francisco might be on 3 or 4. It's not like the world is full of Will Reichards. There's a reason that they spent a draft pick on him, is because he is really an exceptional kicker, and you can't understate the value that Will Reichard has brought to this team so far this year, that every single time he's trotted out, and this is why it was so shocking the other night, and then not surprising to find out that something was wrong, is every time he's trotted out, that ball has gone right through the middle of the post, no matter how far away Will Reichard has been. A major part of this team's success has been their kicking, and now that creates a pretty big question mark. The other thing is that Andrew DePaula also got hurt, a long snapper injury. He hurt his hand, and it is going to need a procedure which will require the Vikings to go out and find a different long snapper to come in and long snap. And of course, this sends me back to 2017 when the Vikings long snapper was injured, Kevin McDermott, and they were forced to sign Jeff Overbaugh. And if you don't know the story, I will brief you on it quickly. The Vikings signed Jeff Overbaugh, who was from Alaska, just a random guy who was a long snapper, and he ultimately played a major role in causing the Minneapolis Miracle because of a mistake blocking on his long snap that got Ryan Quigley's punt blocked and opened the door for the Saints to have just enough time to come back, which left Case Keenum in need of the Minneapolis Miracle. So you got to think that when a long snapper gets injured, that's one of the signs of the apocalypse, or that something crazy is going to happen when you're asking somebody to be the backup long snapper. And just in my brain goes back to the time that the Giants against the 49ers in the Kerry Collins era. Who was it against? Maybe it was, I think it was against the 49ers when they had to go to a backup long snapper, and it ended up playing a huge role in a playoff game where they botched a snap that would have been a kick to either tie or go ahead. Someone can give me the exact year on that. It is something to watch. It absolutely is. There aren't that many human beings in the world who are long snappers, and usually if they are and they're good at it, they're on an NFL team if they're that level. The Vikings were lucky to find Andrew DePaula when they did. I believe that was at the 2020 or 2021 season, and he has been so wildly consistent. This part of their game, the operation from snap to hold to kick, has been almost perfect this entire year until Sunday night, and then now 2 players out. This could be a little bit of an X factor going forward with DePaula and Reichard now injured, but we'll see how long it's going to be for both of those players. Also, Christian Darrisaw had his surgery today, successful surgery. He'll get on the path to coming back. But one little note on that was that Kevin O'Connell said that Darrisaw spent last week helping out Cam Robinson to get ready for that game, which I think speaks to the type of person that Christian Darrisaw is. He didn't have to do that. And Cam Robinson did a great job. He allowed 4 pressures, but no sacks, no QB hits. And Kevin O'Connell said today that they started originally trying to help Cam Robinson out with giving him a little bit of help, whether it was chips or just moving protections his way. And then they realized that they were getting beat up on the interior, as is often the case with this team. And they had to leave Cam Robinson out on an island by himself at left tackle, and to play 42 snaps, allow 4 hurries, and that is it. A really, really good job by Cam Robinson, and justifies the trade already. Whatever they gave up for the trade, you get a win because in part because Cam Robinson was able to hold down that position. I'm not sure if they do win the game if that is not the case. If they had their defensive ends, Laiatu Latu, played in that game. And actually, Dallas Turner ended up with more pressures. For all of you who want to talk about that, I didn't see too many chat messages about Turner being a bust or anything last night after he had a really good game. But the fact that they were able to slow down the pass rush of the Colts is a credit to Cam Robinson arriving in the middle of the week and then being able to go in there and play a fairly good game. And I think you saw how it solidifies enough that left tackle position to allow the offense to still operate. It doesn't have to have Christian Darrisaw and Christian Darrisaw only to play football. But if the drop-off was Darrisaw to Blake Brandel trying to switch positions, and he had a pretty tough night against the Colts, then you might have not been able to play the offense that you want to play. But with Cam Robinson, clearly they could. and it helped them stay on the field a lot, get a win. He was pretty good as a run blocker, which wasn't sure really what to expect there with his PFF run blocking grades not being so great for his career. But that position now feels like it is solid again. It's not all world, but it definitely is solid at the left tackle. And now the question turns to what type of moves will the Vikings make, if any? At least my understanding, what it sounds like from reading, talking to people, everything else, is that the NFL is all in on trade deadline talks. It used to be once upon a time that there were occasionally trades, occasionally trade talks that happened, but it just fell flat at the NFL trade deadline. It wasn't what like the NHL, it wasn't like Major League Baseball or basketball where you have all sorts of crazy movement. It was more of a belief, I think, from a lot of people in the NFL. It's too hard to just add players and you got to fight to the very end. Plus, they've moved the trade deadline back and back, which now allows teams to see that they are 2-7. And I think it's been really significant that they moved the trade deadline back this far. So all these teams that are bad, they can all look at their situations and go, we got to be selling. We cannot be buying at this point. And, or teams can say, like the Vikings, if we win this game, we're in, we're buying, we're going to be a team that tries to improve. And I am curious to see what happens tomorrow. There will be a trade deadline special tomorrow night. And look, it's the biggest thing happening in America tomorrow. So you're going to want to be here talking about the NFL trade deadline rather than anywhere else or watching anything else. That's just my thought for tomorrow, specifically November 5th, 2024. But I do think that there's a realistic possibility based on the fact that they went and got Cam Robinson and got Cam Akers. Again, a move that paid off right away. Even one or two drives, even the fact that they can now have an RB2 who they can mix and match with Aaron Jones and they can trust at a big point in the game. Both trades being worth conditional late round picks. So now, do they use the fifth rounders? Do they go crazy and look for somebody that could be a first round pick and on the move? That seems harder to believe that they would be able to find a partner to trade a first round pick, get somebody back that's going to be on the team for multiple years that will be a true enough game changer to justify giving up a first round pick. It feels unlikely. It also feels like I've always been of the mind, if you got the right person, then do the deal. Like, don't worry about, well, we don't have this much draft capital or that much capital. If it's a good deal for your team, then make that deal. If you could go all in, then go all in. But you can't go all in for a rental and move a first round pick for somebody who might have any chance of not being here. And that significantly limits the number of players that they could target as far as big names. There's only a couple of big names that you could come up with that any team would really consider moving for a first round pick at the trade deadline. But it's just my sense that the phones are ringing like crazy today, and they will be tomorrow around the NFL with so many teams that are in bad spots. I mean, gosh, look at the Titans, Jacksonville, the Giants, the Saints, so many teams that are down bad, and the Browns got killed. And there's all these teams that have terrible cap situations in the future too that might need moves. I mean, I've looked at Newsome or Ward from Cleveland as players that they could potentially look into. Now, all of a sudden, I was against the Marshawn Lattimore idea mostly when people would bring it up, but maybe I'm a little more intrigued for a late round draft pick to try to solidify the defense for a rental there when that team is going to have to take pennies on the dollar because you're doing them a favor by taking these players. They can't afford them. The salary cap, my friends, is real. Not that I have to tell Vikings fans who know that because you guys are educated about how football works and you saw the limitations of Kirk Cousins and the Vikings salary cap in the past. It's really New Orleans Saints folks who seem to have just found out that the salary cap could be a problem for them over the last couple of years because Drew Brees doesn't make everyone better all the time. Shocker, right? But I do think that the Vikings will be making a lot of phone calls, and we'll see if there is a potential fit. I would guess that there would be a move to try to solidify some spot of the roster, but I would be surprised if it's a wild and crazy acquisition that they make. So I'm curious about your thoughts. Throw in questions, comments, opinions. What happened yesterday? The way the Vikings coach, they played, the kicker situation, and your final chance here tonight to get in your trade ideas. So throw them at me, and in about 15 minutes, Manny Hill will pick the Vikings schedule. So let's get to JW here. Do you think they could get Jeffrey Simmons for their 2025 first rounder, or would it take more? I think that Jeffrey Simmons is one of the best players in the entire NFL, and it would be really hard to get him for one first round pick. The Tennessee Titans have no motivation to give away their best player when they have no players on their roster. He's under contract. He's not old. He's a guy that could be good for many years for them. I doubt that when they hired their new coach and GM, they were thinking, hey, let's be bad forever. Now, they're probably thinking 2 years type of deal where they have to rebuild. Maybe around Will Levis. I don't think so at this point. You can probably call that one, that Will Levis doesn't look like a starting quarterback in the NFL. He looks much more like a backup who can occasionally be good, but not on a consistent basis. So they need to find a quarterback. They need to rebuild so many parts of their roster, the weapons, the offensive line, the defense, that giving away Jeffrey Simmons, unless you are getting more than one first round pick, does not make a lot of sense for the Titans. But that would be a player that, if he's on the Vikings, is a total game changer. Grateful Dad wants Marshawn Lattimore. That would work if it is the right price. If you're talking about one of those fifth round picks, maybe. That feels like even too much considering how badly they need to dump salary. That's one of the major reasons why these teams have had to take almost nothing for some of these trades, is that they're just not in a position where they can argue that they should hold on to the player. It's either, if you're a lost team and your guy is hitting free agency, well, get rid of him. I mean, there's no purpose on holding on to a player like that. But also, if you're a team with players that have big salaries, similarly, like they're doing you a favor by taking them off your hands, because if they're a unrestricted free agent the following season, well, you lose them for nothing. Or in this case, with someone like Lattimore, there might be a price to pay. I don't know what his contract situation is, but they're trying to dump as much salary as they possibly can. So you're doing them a solid by taking salary off their books. I mean, that's why the deadline has been favorable, I think, this year. These last couple of weeks have kind of been the deadline to the buying teams. And if you're the Vikings, you've got a couple of fifths to burn a hole in your pocket. Maybe you draft one player that's a first round pick for next year. That would look really funny on drafthistory.com. You're scrolling down year by year and you're like, wait, well, where did 2025 go? Why is one guy? Is this a glitch? You're emailing them. This has to be a glitch. This can't be right. Could be if the Vikings decide to make those moves. We'll see. We'll see. I think rentals aren't worth anything more than that, anything more than fifth round picks. And so far, they've gotten two good rental players for less than that, and they've dipped into 2026. Would they dip into 2026 for a third rounder if they had the right player that they could potentially reach for? I'm very curious to see, but the prices have not been very high, which makes me think that they could very much be buying. CJ says, best argument for the Vikings to be all in is that injuries and game-to-game chaos will hit everyone. Best not to self-select out. Who's to say when you'll simply be the last man standing? Oh, it's a good point. I mean, you think about and this is why they kind of go back to the just get in thing. Well, I don't think just get in really applies to a number 7 seed. I do think just get in applies to the top 3 seeds when it comes to the playoffs, maybe even the top 4, because things happen. Brock Purdy tears his, UCL in a playoff game. I mean, San Francisco was the better team against Philadelphia, I think, overall a couple years ago, 2022, and Philadelphia ends up in the Super Bowl because the other guy tore his arm. And then their other backup got hurt too. So they ended up playing with a guy who couldn't throw the football at all in a game in a playoff game that was for a trip to the Super Bowl. Stuff does happen like that if you put yourself in that position to be a top team. We also saw the Rams. How about them with a guy drops a pass that should have been an interception in the playoffs? San Francisco doesn't go to the Super Bowl. The Rams do. You at least have to give yourself the best shot to be in the dance, to have an opportunity for maybe something to go wrong. But Detroit is still the only team that I look at and go, okay, yeah, they're better than the Vikings. Are they 1988 San Francisco 49ers and the Vikings are nowhere close? No. I think that we saw that on the same field, the Vikings can play with the Detroit Lions. And even if you factor in the home field advantage for the Vikings, it's not like in any part of that game they were run off the field by Detroit. Detroit is a stronger team. Their offensive line's great. Their quarterback's great. Their receivers are great. The running backs are great. And their defense has really, really shored a lot of things up. I was skeptical about that. But who else? The Commanders, Atlanta, these are all teams that have flaws, and in some cases, more flaws than the Vikings do. So I think that making decisions to add, to give yourself a shot at being a top 2 to 3 team entering the playoffs, considering Chicago's starting to fall apart. These next 3 games are against 2 teams that are sellers and are in the cellar. And then against a Chicago team that seems to be kind of turning on its coach after the whole Hail Mary thing. And then leaving Caleb Williams in the game when they were way down and he had an ankle injury. I don't know what they're doing there. There's a lot of winnable games going forward. Arizona is going to be tough. Atlanta is going to be tough, definitely, with the amount of weapons that they have. And Seattle is not an easy place to play. It's not an easy team to beat. But all these teams are either even or below where the Vikings stand. And those are the toughest non-division games for the rest of the season for this Vikings team. So it would make sense if they are thinking after getting that win, getting to 6-2, that you could snap your fingers and be 8-2 pretty fast, maybe even 9-2, and at worst 8-3, and still in the driver's seat. Green Bay losing yesterday, well, it does hurt the Vikings' chances of winning the NFC North. Did put Green Bay behind, and also Green Bay dealing with a quarterback who's banged up. And that may end up being the case for Jordan Love the rest of the season. Topaz says Kwesi reportedly spent time with Tim Connolly. Oh, not reportedly. On the Purple Insider podcast over the summer, Kwesi told me that he spent time with Tim Connolly. So if it was reported elsewhere, well, that's great. Hopefully they cited the Purple Insider podcast that he appeared on. Anyway, during the offseason to exchange notes, do you think that he's concocting a surprise before the deadline, a Rudy Cat splash versus a depth play? Oh, I think that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah spends a lot of time in his office at TCO Performance Center concocting a lot of things. There's a difference between trying to come up with the ideas and actually executing them. And I think that, I mean, even if we go back to that whole Jefferson, Malik Neighbors rumor and all that, I just get the impression that with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, he's always thinking of different ideas and pitching them and talking them over, even if they have nothing realistic to them. So I'm guessing that he's got a whiteboard or whatever. Maybe he's got one of those cool iPads you can write on with the pen of 20, 30 trades that they could potentially do and that they might be interested in if the situation is right, if the other team is interested. There's a lot of moving parts. You guys bring up Jeffrey Simmons a lot, Dexter Lawrence a lot. I'm sure that he's thought of it. I'm sure that they've thought of, here's how we could land the big fish. But there is a point where you are going too far and that you're going to hurt JJ McCarthy. If you give up 2 first-round picks for Jeffrey Simmons, yeah, that might actually hurt JJ McCarthy in the long run and the next 4 years, which is really the window that they've opened up for themselves. I, and probably you, and probably everybody else in the NFL thought before the season that the Vikings window was not going to open until next year to potentially go chase a Super Bowl. But here we are. Surprise, it's open. That's definitely a case for making a move. But is it a case for giving up everything when you're expecting your window to be 5 years building with JJ McCarthy after this season? And I mean, we're not 100% sure on that. If it is going to be McCarthy, I guess if Sam Darnold's in the NFC Championship, that might be a harder decision to move on to JJ McCarthy after that. We'll have that discussion when we have to, not right now. That'll be about maybe 20 shows in a row after the end of the season. But for right now, it makes sense to me that if you can get someone at the right price who's going to be here for a first round pick, then you should do it. And another point is, but I don't think you can go 2 first rounders and change or anything like that, because then you are missing out on future opportunities to have edge rushers, linemen, whatever it might be that are on rookie contracts that also matters as well. There was an interesting tweet though today by Brad Spielberger, formerly of PFF, now works for an agency, where he was talking about the weak draft and especially weak free agency class. Drafts are harder to predict, but free agency classes maybe less so. He was saying that because the free agency class doesn't have a lot of major needle movers, that we might see more trades as teams try to acquire talent that could be with them for the future. And that might result in pushing the needle a little bit in that direction that we're talking about here. And maybe that is 5th rounders. Maybe that is the first round pick. There are so many options on the table that it's making my head spin as we go into the trade deadline here. The Pollock says, I don't really mind if they spend more draft capital to bring guys in. I just hope they're not all 1-season rentals. They might be if it's 5th round picks or conditional picks from next year. And in that case, I don't think that it's that big of a deal to be giving up those kind of picks. And I mean, there's one guy that I could think of that became a really good 5th round pick, Stephon Diggs. Not too many others outside of that. So if you do have to use those for a rental, I don't think it's the end of the world for this year when you do have an opportunity to be in the mix. You'd prefer, though, that you could get guys for multiple years. That's for sure. Zoomer Kev says, how much of Vikings fans jumping ship was due to no left tackle as opposed to losing 2 tough games? Any serious team needs a left tackle. Certainly a big part of it. I think it was the double gut punch. It was not just you lose a game where it seems like your weaknesses are on display, but also Darrisaw. Everybody knows Christian Darrisaw is one of the best players in the NFL. Everybody knows that. You see what he does on a weekly basis. You see how important it is to have him over there. And to think that they would have David Questenberry or Blake Brandel switching positions, that was a scary proposition with a quarterback who holds on to the ball, as opposed to getting Cam Robinson. And just, I can't say enough how amazing that is that Cam Robinson went in there and did what he was able to do against the Colts. Now he's in playing shape. He's been playing all year. He does know the Colts, but still he just arrived in the building. It's not quite as impressive as what Josh Dobbs did, but it's up there. It's very similar to TJ Hawkinson. Played every snap, 42 pass blocking snaps, only 4 QB hurries. That's it. Well done. And well done on a trade for getting someone so experienced that they would be able to do that. And it adds additional value to the trade that he was able to play in that game, because otherwise I think you lose value. Every game he doesn't play, you lose value on the trade. So it was a value add that he could play right away. Rich says, if you had 2 players to grab with our 3 picks, who would you get with the 2 fifths? Who would you get with our first and work out a current contract? The first rounder is harder to figure out because I have this problem. I've been overrating players in terms of their value, because I remember when Cam Robinson's name initially came up, I thought, I don't know if you could get him. It's probably going to be more expensive for a left tackle. And then, they got him. Oh, all right. So first rounders, because I think of Denzel Ward, but then is he actually worth a first rounder, or is that team so desperate to drop a salary cap for the future that they might just do it for not a first? But then can you be the team that gets him because the next pick that you have is a 5th? I might look at, as far as 5th round picks go, someone like Jadeveon Clowney, who's been playing fairly well for the Carolina Panthers as an interior rusher. That's where my focus is quite a bit here, would be who could they find as an interior rusher. I also like the idea of someone like Delvin Tomlinson, really good player. Who could allow for more of a rotation. I thought that was helpful for them last night. Harrison Phillips played something like 31 snaps, and lo and behold, had the highest PFF grade. When he plays 50 snaps, he doesn't. But when he plays 30 snaps, he's a great player. That's where I would look, and then maybe a fill-in corner with a fifth, whichever one they think is going to be the best fit. That's hard to figure out. Jonathan Jones, maybe. I mean, there's a lot of different corners that have kind of bounced around. All right. Let's bring in the man of the hour. Wow. All decked out in Tennessee garb tonight. Manny Hill, you are primed and ready to pick the schedule as you do every Monday night. You know how important this show is to me, Manny, on Monday night with you picking the schedule? I was booking my travel for Jacksonville yesterday, and I was looking at flights back, and I was like, nah, can't fly back at that time. That's when we do this show live on YouTube. So I am actually flying out Sunday night, which will mean running out of the stadium right after the podcast and getting to the airport as fast as possible. But I did that just for you. So how are you?
I am great. And yes, I am wearing my Tennessee Vols gear. I have to make it very clear. It's Tennessee, University of Tennessee. It's not Tennessee Titans because it's my affection for the University of Tennessee is the polar opposite of my affection for the Tennessee Titans. But, um, yeah, just celebrating a nice win over Kentucky over the weekend. And so I'm just happy about that. Anytime Tennessee beats Kentucky, I'm happy.
There you go. Maybe check your mic settings there because it seems like it's coming through maybe your computer. Sometimes that happens with our stream, so we'll get that corrected. You sound a little bit like you've been held hostage, but I know you actually love Tennessee. So you know how there's that meme that's, hey, say something that we know isn't you and you're being held hostage. Like I would say, I love trick plays that Kevin O'Connell runs, and people would know something was wrong. So it's not that type of situation. All right, you good?
How is that? That better?
Oh yes, that is better.
Okay.
Let me know in the comments if that's okay. But that sounds totally fine to me. So give me, before we dive into it, give me your biggest takeaway from the Vikings victory last night over the Colts.
What a weird game because the score does I don't think the score really indicates how well the Vikings played overall or how much better they played than the Colts. The defense was outstanding. I mean, Joe Flacco looked every bit of 39 years old last night. And the offense moved the ball with effectiveness. It was just those turnovers that really kind of changed things. And then, Will Reichard missing the 2 field goals, and hopefully whatever's going on with him and his kicking leg can get healed and healthy fairly soon. We'll find out. But yeah, I mean, it final score was 21-13, but it felt, when you look at the stats, I mean, it felt like the Vikings won that game by 3 or 4 touchdowns. I mean, they were just in complete control. And even when it was 7-0 Indy at the half, I didn't really feel that. I wasn't that concerned because the Vikings had clearly outplayed the Colts the entire first half. It just, the score wasn't really reflecting it. So I kind of figured they would get things going in the second half, and they did. It was good.
Okay, so the other day we talked about spooky things that happened to the Vikings. The best kicker maybe they've ever had gets hurt. Who gets hurt as a kicker? Come on. That was weird because the first one he missed, I thought, okay, well, it was bound to happen. He just barely missed it. But when he missed the 31-yarder, something is going wrong here because this dude doesn't miss 51-yarders, much less 31. And then it made sense that there was something wrong, but it sounds like it could be an injury that keeps him out for some significant amount of time, which means going out and getting a random kicker. And I could just see it. They also have a long snapper injury. Everybody thought this. I'm just saying what everybody thought, that they are playing the Bears and they're at Soldier Field and they just need a little chip shot field goal to win the game. And the long snapper screws it up and the kicker shanks it. And then that's the Joe long snapper game that we talk about for the rest of time. I can already see it happening. You know, I brought up Cooper Rush the other day when we were talking about funny Zimmer Kirk scenarios, and Cooper Rush ended up getting into that game. I just wish that Zimmer could have had a post-game press conference. I just wish I could have heard for him and see who he blamed after that game. But let's waste no more time, Manny. The Vikings are 6-2, right where you've had them all along, probably from the beginning of the season. And then they will go next week to Jacksonville to face the Jaguars. Do the Vikings win this football game?
Yeah, they win, and I don't think it's going to be particularly close. The Jaguars are just in a really bad way. I think the Jaguars have the Vikings this coming Sunday, and then they go to Detroit after that, and then it's their bye. So that's probably gonna be a time maybe where if they lose these next two games and they're 2-9, that might be the time where they pull the plug on Doug Peterson because it's going into the bye. So my microphone is a little quiet. Maybe I need to lean into it a little bit more. But yes, I will say the Vikings win that game pretty handily on Sunday.
Yeah, I think so too. It sounded okay to me, maybe a little bit closer to the face, and you'll be good there. But as far as this game, this is one where you almost don't even want to say it. The gap between the two teams is so enormous that should I even point this out? The Jaguars are one of the truly worst, most pathetic teams in the league. But the thing is that even against Philadelphia, they kind of hung around a little. They have a quarterback with a lot of talent. And the game you got to keep in mind was Carson Wentz. All he had to do was beat the Jaguars, the Urban Meyer year. That's all he had to do was beat the Jaguars. And they were plucky enough. It is the any given Sunday type of situation. But I don't think this is a trap game, letdown game. It's your team's way better than their team. Go beat them. There's no excuse for not beating this team. They're banged up. Their left tackle plays here now. Their coach has completely lost the team. Their quarterback is a bust. They just that everything has gone wrong for them. So beat them and go to 7-2. Now, then they go to the Tennessee Titans as well. Why don't we just rewind and play everything I just said again? A disaster team. But I would say, I think that the Titans have a better defense than the Jaguars. And that would be the one thing that they have a few game changers and they can run the football. They're a little bit more dangerous than Jacksonville. Do they beat the Jags and the Titans to get to 8-2?
I do think they beat the Titans too, just because kind of for the same reasons we talked about with Jacksonville. The Vikings are just a superior team overall. But I do think, to your point about their defense, it could make things a little interesting and make that game maybe a little bit closer, a little bit more competitive. Because, I mean, Jeffrey Simmons, the Vikings fans are begging for the Vikings to make the move and trade for Jeffrey Simmons. Well, there's a reason for that. He's an excellent player, and he's an interior rusher. We have seen this Vikings offensive line. Some of those interior offensive linemen have trouble with guys who can disrupt and put pressure on the quarterback, and he's a guy that can certainly do that. So I think that might cause some problems for the Vikings, but I think just the overall talent will be superior, and the Vikings will come away with another win.
I agree. I was just talking about a few minutes ago the Chicago Bears, who this is why we pick the schedule every week, and why it's so interesting is because so much changes every week. 2 weeks ago, we're going, ooh, Caleb Williams is turning a corner, and it looks like he's going to be more dangerous than you might have expected. And then regression, ankle injury, tougher opponents, and they look a lot worse. They seem to be turning on their coach. The players do not appear to be very happy. They've got injuries. DJ Moore tweaked his ankle yesterday and just walked off the field. I mean, they've got a lot of things going wrong. How many franchises right now, 9 weeks into this season, are going, what is going on with our team? I think Chicago, they're teetering. And I was texting our friend Courtney Cronin, who covers the Bears. I was saying, are we going to see Matt Eberflus twice this year? Are we sure that 2 times this guy is going to be the coach? Because I'm thinking maybe the first time, but maybe not the second time. So how about that first time? It will be at Chicago. I can't call it a house of horrors because it hasn't been recently, and it hasn't been in the Kevin O'Connell era. November 24th at Soldier Field.
Yeah, it's weird. The last few weeks, I've been calling this a loss for the Vikings because Soldier Field is just kind of a tough place to play. It's going to be later in the year. The weather might be nasty and sloppy. But I'm with you on what's happening with the Bears right now. They just seem to be falling apart, and it might just be a thing where you look at this marriage of Matt Eberflus and the Chicago Bears with where they're trying to go with Caleb Williams and trying to build around him. It might just be time for a change there anyway, and they might need to just get somebody in for next year to kind of really start that process of building something with him because they're still I think overall they're still in a pretty good spot where they can kind of build around a young quarterback. They've got cap space and they've got young players and talent around him. Um, with all that said, though, I think this is going to be the first time I'm going to pick the Vikings to actually go into Soldier Field and win in all the times that I've been picking the schedule this year. So I will call that a win just because I think the Bears are just kind of falling apart right now.
Suddenly 9-2. The
Yeah.
Minnesota Vikings is where you have them. I also think that maybe the Bears are instructive a little bit about pairing coaches who are deep into their tenure with young quarterbacks. It's a tricky thing if you don't have any winning in the past. See, at least Kevin O'Connell, when McCarthy takes over, assuming that's going to happen, he's going to have multiple good seasons in his past to be
Yeah.
able to lean on. Matt Eberflus has none. There's no credibility there at all. When you draft a quarterback to save the marriage, it almost always fails time and time and time again. And they should have just blown out Eberflus, got a quarterback coach, like offensive mind, quarterback minded coach to pair with Caleb Williams, because now the leash is short for your coach when you have a rookie quarterback. That's never a good combination, but that's their problem. Our problem is a December 1st, Arizona fighting Cardinals, who might have been sellers if they lost yesterday. Now they're buyers. They went out and got a pass rusher. Amazing how 1 week can change everything. I don't know what we were at last week, but I don't know if it was 9-2, Manny. That's where we're at. Vikings and Cardinals. And I'll give you this. You could pick any letdown game. Any game is a letdown that's not a win against these other teams other than the division, because we are kind of out of letdown games. And I think it's fair to pick wins at Jacksonville and Tennessee. So I'm not trying to make you lean toward that, using that here, but you'll have to pick one of them.
So the Cardinals traded for was it Baron Browning? They traded got him from the Broncos, which is kind of interesting to see the Broncos trading off guys because they're 5-5. I know they got blown out by Baltimore yesterday, but to see them kind of in the playoff conversation and them trading off guys was a little bit strange. But I digress. Yeah, I think this is the Cardinals. They're just kind of that team where it's kind of hard to figure out like who they are, which is sort of the prototypical like mediocre, middling kind of team. But I think they're going in the right direction. I think they got a good head coach. I still believe in Kyler Murray. I will put this down as a Cardinals win at US Bank Stadium to drop the Vikings to 9-3. The Cardinals are playing. They're playing better now. They're 5-4. They're trying to win that division. They got a shot at winning that division. They're right there. So, yeah, I'll put this down as a Cardinals win.
Yeah, the thing I'm curious about is the Vikings haven't really, because Anthony Richardson didn't play. Have they played any scrambling quarterback this year? I don't think. I mean, when they face Caleb Williams, they will, but he's not a running quarterback in the same way that Kyler Murray is. They have weapons. They've got a ton of them. They run the football. They can throw it to their tight end. They have one of the best young receivers in the league. That if you're making a case for losing to Arizona, and probably if you win the next 3 games in a row anyway, and you win 4 in a row, it's always tough to have winning streaks that go on for that long. So it would make sense that they would lose a game. I don't know if Arizona has a tough enough defense to slow down the Vikings' weapons, though, in their secondary. That actually should be an entertaining game. I like watching Arizona. They're pretty fun. Their game against Miami was just a really one of the more entertaining games that I've seen this year. All right, Kirk revenge. The Vikings coming in. They're 9-3. Kirk, it's actually really funny, Manny. So one stat that I'm always interested in is big time throws and turnover worthy plays. I talk about it on the show a lot. Turnover worthy plays is a really good stat. because it tells you, are you getting unlucky with some of the interceptions and things like that? Or are you putting the ball in harm's way too much? Kirk Cousins has 6 big time throws this year and 14 turnover worthy plays, and yet still is one of the best quarterbacks in yards, quarterback rating, and he has the same exact touchdown to interception ratio as $10 million Sam Darnold. How interesting is that? It is fascinating that someone else could throw the ball to number 18. Who would have seen it coming other than me from 2020 to present? But anyway, not the point. They'll play the Falcons. Kirk 1-0 in revenge games. And look, give Kirk credit. Played his butt off in that game. Played great. He played great. He had a bad strip sack, as Kirk wanted to do, but mostly got the ball to his playmakers, got it out of his hands quick, didn't take too many sacks, accurate as heck, and took advantage of how pathetic that Dallas Cowboys defense has become. So, do the Vikings beat Kirk in this revenge contest?
I feel like this is a game that I'm going to be wavering back and forth on over the next several weeks up until we get to that point. I'm going to call it a loss for the Vikings for now because I think Atlanta's building some confidence a little bit. They obviously are in prime position to take control of that division and win it and maybe, probably run away with it because the Panthers and Saints are not a factor. Tampa Bay is really the only threat to them in the South, and Tampa Bay is just kind of a middling team right now. So this division can be had by the Falcons. They've got the inside track to it, and I think they're playing a little bit better. They're still just playing the same. It's those fans are getting the same Kirk Cousins experience that we got for 6 years. Close games, exciting games, good numbers from the quarterback, but also the other numbers beneath the numbers that kind of make you raise your eyebrow a little bit and kind of wonder, like, how good is this guy and can he really take you far? So I think I'll put this down as a loss for now, but that's only because I think I'm foreshadowing possibly a future playoff matchup that I think the Vikings would then turn the tables on and get a win. So,
well, we know Kirk's not going to have any trouble playing at the stadium. He's used to that. He hasn't heard the noise on the wrong side of it, but it's familiar ground for him. And he gets the ball out pretty quick these days. Not something he did when his Achilles was okay, but now that he's, I think, pretty terrified of getting hit because of the injury, it's made him better in a lot of ways. That ball's coming out pretty quick out of his hands because he can't scramble, he can't roll, he can't hitch a bunch of times, can't even really step up in the pocket. He's just sitting back there. But that's what's hurt the Vikings is when other teams have playmakers that you could get it to Bijan Robinson. That's the Puka Nacua, the St. Brown, the Gibbs. They have players like that. And that would be the terrifying part of that particular game. The Falcons defense also is very bad. That's another part of it. They weren't against Dak Prescott, but nobody has this year. So the Vikings then fall to 9-4, and you can guess what the next Monday's podcast would be like after that, Manny. That would be the sky has fallen again, and then they play a Monday Night Football game against the Chicago Bears on December 16th. Still 9-4, still in the thick of the playoff race. What happens there?
I think the Vikings win that game and complete the season sweep of the Chicago Bears and move to 10-4 because by then, to your point, to your texting question to Courtney, might not be Matt Eberflus still coaching the Bears at that point, depending on how things play out. But yeah, I will put that down as a win at home for the Vikings taking care of business.
Well, we now know that Norv Turner won't be available to take the spot because the Raiders are bringing in Norv and his son. And, they once worked for the Vikings. But I texted Sage Rosenfels today because he sent me that news. And he was just like, what? Like Norv Turner? What? And I was like, where's Terry Robisky or Kevin Gilbride or, all the Paul Hackett, all the coaches from the 90s that are, are you just bring back all those, how is Norv still around, still doing this? But
he's 72.
That's crazy to me.
Goodness.
I mentioned for the Vikings that they should get Cam Cameron because every player they have that they've traded for is named Cam. So that's next man up. Next Cam up, December 22nd. So the 10-4 Vikings will face the Seattle Seahawks on the road.
Hmm.
Excuse me. Yeah, you can make the pick there while I'm sneezing. But the setup is whoever knows what Seattle's going to do in a football game. You talk about entertainment value. That team is wild. Yesterday's game, Stafford makes an unbelievable touchdown throw to end it. Just absurd arm talent on that one. But Geno to Jackson Smith-Njigba, his throw for a touchdown was insane at the end of that to tie the game. That was really, really fun. And I think that's just who Seattle is. They just play wild, crazed football games.
Yeah, they're kind of like Arizona in that way, where you just week to week, you just don't really know what you're going to get out of them. You don't know if they're going to lay an egg or if they're just going to go and blow somebody out. I mean, Seattle got destroyed at home by Buffalo. They lost a heartbreaker to the Rams, but they also went into Atlanta and just like destroyed the Falcons a couple of weeks ago. So you don't really know what kind of team that you're going to get with them. I'll still put this down as a loss just because that can still be a difficult place to play up in Seattle. But again, that's another one of those games where 2 weeks from now, I might feel differently about it just because it's going to be hard to really figure out what type of team in Seattle you're going to get up at that point.
So the 10-5 Vikings with 2 weeks to go face the Green Bay Packers at home and the Detroit Lions at Ford Field. Package these games. What happens? Do they finish with 12, 11, or 10, Manny?
I think they finish with 12. I think they win those 2 games out. I think they sweep the Packers and they win a game against Detroit, maybe boosting their seeding. I think Detroit has probably the number 1 seed wrapped up by then. I can still see Dan Campbell playing all of his guys still in that game. But I think, I could see that kind of being a game where the Vikings just play really well. Once we get kind of late in the fourth quarter, the Vikings kind of have the game in hand, and Dan Campbell kind of maybe sits his guys to make sure Jared Goff or somebody doesn't get injured. And so the Vikings will finish 12-5 at that point.
Okay. Last week you had them with 11 wins. You are being challenged a little bit on back-to-back losses at home, which would be very surprising. But then again, it's not like home field advantage is what it used to be. I think if it were me, I would say they split those 2 and also split the final 2. If I was picking it different from you, I would still end up with 12. I agree with 12 that maybe they'll surprise us with a loss in the next 3 weeks, which would really send us back into meltdown mode. But you just never know when your backup kicker is going to miss a kick from your backup long snapper. Somebody check on Ryan Wright to make sure he's okay. As far as I know, he was not wounded in the game against the Colts. Of all the people, it's a very physical game. They ran a ton of plays. Of all the people to get hurt, it's the kicker and the long snapper. Put it in the very large bucket of things I've never seen before that somehow the Vikings ended up pulling off. So that brings us back to your questions and comments. Do you agree with Manny? 12 wins. Maybe you don't like the way that he got him there, but also it's hard to predict NFL schedules. So sometimes picking chaos makes more sense than trying to do it normally. And questions and comments on the trade deadline and what the Vikings will do, your predictions, your thoughts. Phil says, I don't see them trading a first-round pick with so little draft capital next year. The podcast will be roasting Kwesi next year if it happens. I don't know that I have ever roasted Kwesi on this podcast because he's done a lot of things that are good to put them at 6-2 so far. And also a lot of things that this podcast would probably also do. Now, moving all the draft capital it's in a lot of ways anti-analytical if you think about the big, broad picture of things. But one thing that frustrates me about the discussion about analytics, Manny, is that we could take larger statements and try to apply them, but you can't apply them to all situations. You can't apply them to a team that took several years of getting their salary cap right for when Kirk Cousins finally leaves to then stack a team with veteran players for great coaches, Brian Flores, Kevin O'Connell, and a team that already has players that are superstars as foundational pieces like Jefferson, Darisaw going forward. Addison is still on the path to be a star player. I mean, when you have those players in place, and then you can add with all the money that you have, and you could trade for somebody for a first round pick. It's sort of like what Miami did with Tyreek Hill. We've seen a lot of teams do this. San Francisco with Trent Williams and with Christian McCaffrey. It's not an uncommon strategy. Even Philadelphia with A.J. Brown, that when you get the foundational pieces in place, then you start selling off your draft picks to stack up to give yourself a possible chance to win. So if they trade a first round pick for an absolute difference making star player right now that will help them into the future as well, they will not be roasted. I just will take draft night off next year. But I tell me how you feel about the idea of moving the first.
Sometimes I wonder if the discussion about like trying to deter the Vikings away from trading away the first round pick has to do with like how much excitement goes into the draft. You know what I mean? If it's just like selfishly as fans and you know, people like yourself who cover the team and observe the team, you know, draft night is always just kind of that fun night. So it's always fun to speculate, okay, what are they going to do? Are they going to move up a couple spots? Are they going to trade back and get more picks? Who are they going to take? Oh, they should take this guy, this corner from that place, this, you know, 3 technique guy from that school. To me, it's, you know, if they trade their first round pick and it's for a guy that is, you know, I don't think Jeffrey Simmons is going to happen, but if it's a guy like Jeffrey Simmons, who's a difference maker, who is young enough, who's on a pretty good contract, is going to be with your team into the future, who's going to help you right away, but also be a part of what you're trying to build potentially around JJ McCarthy over the next handful of years. I think you have to do that if you can make that happen, because essentially you're getting a much more known commodity, and that player is you know, it's like you've talked about with the TJ Hawkinson trade. Like, people talk about Kwesi's drafting. Okay, well, trading that draft pick to get TJ Hawkinson, that's basically like you drafted TJ Hawkinson, and now he's a big part of what you're doing right now and what you're going to be a part of over the next several years. So I think you can't be afraid to move that first, because what happens if you hold on to that first round pick and then you take a guy and he's not very good? Because we've seen that play out before. We've got the fan base is still walking on eggshells right now about Dallas Turner. They're questioning whether or not Dallas Turner is going to be any good. Well, he's a first round pick, so you have to you can't really have it both ways, you know? So I think if they find a way to move that pick for somebody that's going to help them right now and into the future as well, I'd be all for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why every situation has to be put under a microscope. If
Yep.
this was a spot where, and you know, I advocated for the total teardown of the 2022 team and not adding Zadarius Smith and keeping Patrick Peterson, I thought that was the perfect time to rip it all to shreds and then start over again. They decided not to do that, and it's worked out for them. But if it was then I would be saying, well, you got to hang on to every single pick. You cannot move on and make trades and try to bring people in. You got to get rookie contract players. You got to take 100 swings. I mean, gosh, the Lions did this really well, but that's a complete tank and rebuild. So they stacked up draft capital, and then they hit on a few guys, and they're draft geniuses, but in part because they spent so much draft capital. I mean, they just brought in so many dudes. They casted a wide net. But where the Vikings are is with a megastar wide receiver. They have a young quarterback that's going to be on the rookie quarterback contract. They've also created an environment where players want to sign, which is another part of it as well, that they can go into free agency every year as being one of the top teams that can bring players in. I'm not generally for broadly teams just blowing out all of their draft capital, but I guess I've come to buy into much more the idea of getting proven players, in part because if you look at the previous Super Bowl winners, teams that go to the Super Bowl, a lot of times they are veteran teams that have made those types of moves. It's very hard for a team with a bunch of rookie contract players to be great right away, and they need to be great quickly once JJ McCarthy gets here. And right now, by the way, since they're 6-2 and we're projecting them to win 12 games, being great this year matters a lot. And I think that's a big part of it for me, Manny, is why are we thinking about anything else but right here, right now, when after winning that game last night, your team is looking the number 2 seed maybe in the face, or the number 3 seed. And if you're a top 3 seed, you have just as good of a chance as anybody to go deep in the playoffs. So when you have a quarterback who is top 5 in quarterback rating, you have the league leader in yardage for wide receivers, you have a defense that just gave up 49 plays and 9 first downs or something to the Colts. They're still good. Is it a far and away chance that they win? Like, are they way ahead of anybody else for the Super Bowl? No, but it's not like they've been here anytime recently. So that, I think that all plays into my thinking. The Pollock 34 says we have a rookie quarterback. We have our franchise wide receiver and left tackle on lock for multiple years. We also have a ton of cap space for the next few years. If Kwesi wants to sell off picks, more power to him. Sean says, I don't want to give up our first for next year. Would prefer to pick up an older run stuffing defensive tackle like Campbell. Campbell's actually a pass rusher. He could still get after. He could do everything, but he's actually more of a pass rusher, which is why I like him ahead of all of the options. Yeah, I mean, I'm sold on that, but to your point, Manny, it does not help me very much when it comes to the draft, because if they sell off their first round pick, that's one of my biggest podcasts every year is my live draft show. So, so that actually does hurt me if that ends up happening. Oh, so how about this comment here? Bradbury would make a great garbage man, someone randomly says for no reason. This is why you watch the film, okay? Garrett Bradbury got run over last night, caused the strip sack. He stepped on Ed Ingram's foot. And the reason he stepped on Ed Ingram's foot, I believe, is because the protection was shifting to the right, and Ingram didn't get out quick enough to block to the right. And that's why he stepped on his foot, and that's why he fell down that way. That's why you watch back the tape. So anyway.
What is Dalton Reisner's status?
I don't know. The numbers on Ed Ingram's last couple of games have been okay, but
I can't watch this anymore with him. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know what kind. I don't know what kind of guy Ed Ingram is, but from a football standpoint, there's just too many times where something has gone wrong, and we're looking at number 67. I don't know how much longer I can really stand watching this.
I thought last night would have been a good time, but I understand that they didn't want to replace 2 guys on the line. I guess we just keep going week to week on that, but it's not like they have a great opponent this week that's going to cause that change. I think that the leash is short and Reisner is standing there ready. I guess we'll find out if they do something with that, but they might surprise us and just say, okay, it's time for him to come in. They ran the ball pretty well last night, which may have been a part of it. I think that run blocking element does matter, and Reisner struggles at it, and Robinson's not that great at it. That may be a major part, but I really think that the biggest thing is just that they didn't want to have 2 guys being replaced at once.
I get it. Yeah.
Zoomer Kev says, I think a lot of these bad teams aren't going to be as willing to trade as they should be. I bet GMs are still going to want to go down with the ship. What do you think of that, Manny? Because what is there, like 9 teams that have 2 wins or 3? There's a lot of teams that there's just no reason to hang on to anything that you have.
Yeah, I don't really know what a lot of these teams are doing right now. I'm surprised we're not seeing more guys get traded. And if you're some of these players that are on these bad teams, if you're a veteran player who's, been in the league for 5-6 years and you're kind of entering your prime and you're on a team that's 2-7, I would imagine you'd want to get out of there, because that team is probably going to start over. maybe they want to keep you around as a part of sort of their rebuild, but I just can't imagine any of those guys would want to stay on those teams. And I would imagine they would want to go somewhere, and they'd go to the front office and say, "Hey, can you move me? Because I'm ready to get out of here. I'm ready to go to a contending team, and you guys can start this rebuild all over." So yeah, I don't know. It's just a lot of bad teams in the league.
Oh,
A
so many.
lot of bad teams in the league.
So many. And yeah, I think if you're the GMs of those teams, you're already pretty screwed. So you've got two options. You can either sell to your owner that, hey, I made moves for the future. We had bad breaks this year, but next year, if I get these draft picks, that'll help me and we could build for the future. Long-term vision is what I'm about as your general manager. If you hang on to players and look like you're only doing it just to try to save your bacon, that means you better go from 2-7 to 9-7, or you are getting fired. And there's some teams that make sense for not being sellers that won yesterday. The Cincinnati Bengals have one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league, and they've just been playing close games that they lost or bad defensively. Arizona's another team you should buy. You got a quarterback in his prime, and you can make the playoffs, and your division's not that great. Go win it. Don't be selling off parts. But if you're the New York Giants, what's your justification? If you're their general manager, what are you supposed to argue in Carolina about hanging on to pieces? Although they have a new leadership there, so they're in a better spot to be able to do it. The New York Jets, I could see. You won a game, see if Aaron Rodgers could turn it around. It's not like you're playing for the future as the New York Jets. Joe Douglas has to know if you don't win, you are fired. So what's the point in trading, your top corner, DJ Reed or something like that? I couldn't make much sense of that name being thrown around. But I think probably out of let's say there's 10 teams that are totally dead, season's over, maybe 8 of them, it makes sense for them to be traders. And I think there will be a lot of opportunities that are out there for the Vikings to potentially buy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to continue to just search and see what, even if we're talking about them maybe moving their first round pick for something. I think I still like the idea for the Vikings. If you're not going to make like a big splash, a major move, I still think making another move, kind of like what you did to get Cam Akers back. You saw that situation as, hey, look, we need some depth in the running back room. Ty Chandler's just not cutting it right now, and we've got to make sure that Aaron Jones is as fresh and as healthy as possible. Okay, Cam Akers is available. Let's go get him. I mean, I think if you can make something like that happen for an interior defensive lineman or another corner or something, just to add some depth to what you have already, I think that should certainly be on the table too. And then that type of move is not even going to cost you a lot of draft capital.
Okay, take a brief pause for our ad read, and also a quick announcement. We hit 10,000 subscribers. 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. Let's go. Thank you, everyone who has subscribed. If you haven't and you're watching, please do. Also, I gave Jonathan Harrison, producer of this show, a $500 bonus for hitting 10,000. So he is pumped today. And thank you all for contributing to that. Really, really greatly appreciate it. It has been a journey building up this channel. I still forget to turn my microphone on sometimes, but we've tried to make it look good for you. Manny, an invaluable piece of this to be able to get to 10,000 subscribers. So cannot wait to continue to build on that as we go forward. Thank you so much to everybody for that. And also thank you for the support of US Cellular. Let me silence my phone so I can tell you about Us Days at US Cellular. It's back again. Exclusive offers just for customers, just to say thanks. Right now, you get $1,200 off any phone plus $400 off any tablet. Amazing, right? But my family is so excited about their new devices. They keep texting me during the show. They're all about Us Days deals, like $1,200 off any phone plus $400 off any tablet. Terms apply. Visit uscellular.com for details. Jason says the 2025 draft only has 15 players with first round grades. So I see a few teams trading their 2025 first round pick. So they say that every year about this draft only has 15 players, 20. I mean, there's 32 teams. There's probably not 32 guys that are of the same caliber of those top 15 picks. But does it weigh into it all Manny, if I told you could get Denzel Ward, somebody like that from the Cleveland Browns, if you're factoring in that winning 12 games puts you at what, the 26th, 27th, 28th pick, depending on how you do in the playoffs, does that matter to you that the odds of getting a difference-making player at the back end of the first round are so much different than the top 15?
Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of ask yourself, okay, if it's Denzel Ward, if you're crazy, you have to ask yourself, can I get a Denzel Ward caliber player with the 27th pick in the draft? Chances are probably not. Maybe sometimes we see guys get taken in the later first round who end up being like really, really good players. But I think again, I think it just plays into that. You have to decide, like, all right, what are we trying to do here with this first round pick? What are we trying to get out of this first round pick? Do we want a guy that's going to be really young and cheap, but he might take 3 or 4 years to develop, and it might take 3 or 4 years for us to figure out, like, is this guy really good, and is he going to be a big part of our future? Or do you want to get a guy that you know exactly what you're getting out of him, and he's a good player, and he's going to be around for a few years, and he's going to be a big part of what you're trying to do in the future and what you're trying to do right now? I think that's what it has to come down to. Somebody like Denzel Ward, I would probably say, yeah, trade the first round pick. He's a guy, he helps you at a position that you could use some depth at, and he's like really good. So he's not just like a depth guy. He's a guy that is going to play a lot of snaps for you and take some pressure off of Stephon Gilmore and Shaq Griffin. So I would do it. I would absolutely do it.
Okay, I have a really fun question for you, I think. Maybe everyone else won't think this is fun, but I hope you do. Let's say that you hear through the rumor mill, if you're Quasi, you hear through the rumor mill, oh, it sounds like Detroit is trading for Zadarius Smith. So you call up Cleveland and you say, what's the offer you're getting for Zadarius Smith? And they say, well, it's a 5th and a 6th is what they want to give us for Zadarius Smith, Detroit. Would you trade for Zadarius Smith just to keep him from going to the Detroit Lions? If it took giving up more than you wanted to, but you get a pass rusher and you get him not playing for the Detroit Lions, is that like gamesmanship? Would you give up draft capital to make sure that your opponent doesn't get a good player?
Kind of reminds me of back in the day when the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry, like back in the early 2000s, when that rivalry was really heated, and you get to July 31st and like the Red Sox would trade for a guy that they didn't really need, but they just traded for him to keep the Yankees from trading for him, and vice versa. We'd kind of see that too. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that. I mean, if that's all it took, if it was like a 5th or 6th round pick, I'd think about it, because what's the worst thing that Zadarius Smith would bring you? He would bring you depth at edge rusher. You know what I mean? And you have depth there, but the more guys you have there, the more guys you can kind of rotate in. The fresher guys are going to be, the fresher Jonathan Grenard's going to be, the fresher Andrew Van Ginkel's going to be. He's another veteran guy that can kind of show Dallas Turner the ropes a little bit, another guy that can kind of teach him things. So I'd think about it.
So I kind of love this. I kind of love this idea because it keeps the Lions from getting a pass rusher, and that's their biggest weakness. Also, the other thing is too, that it doesn't seem like the Vikings need a pass rusher, and that's true because Grenard is crushing it. He's one of the leaders in pressures for this year, and Van Ginkel's been so good. Dallas Turner had 4 pressures last night, and we want to see more of him. But Patrick Jones still played something like 40 snaps. If you were replacing Patrick Jones with Zadarius Smith, that is an enormous upgrade of a guy who, when he's motivated and he's healthy, he is an absolute madman rushing the passer. And we've seen it. He can do it from anywhere. He can rush from linebacker. He did that under Ed Donatel, where that was the most creative he ever got, was moving around Zadarius Smith, but he can absolutely do it. 2/5 feels like a lot to just top your opponent, but also there's extra added value for making sure that when you get to the playoffs, and I like Cam Robinson, I love what he did last night, but him versus Zadarius Smith or him versus some guy we don't even know. There's a big difference there if the Lions, or if they have to go to their next best option, or if they have to panic and overpay. I like a little thought of gamesmanship here of trying to pay attention, because I thought it was curious that suddenly it's out there that they're trading for Zadarius Smith and then it doesn't happen. And it has not been completed yet, this deal that everybody thinks is going on. I just wonder if somebody put that out there from Cleveland to try to get better offers. Well, Detroit's going to do it. And if you're the Vikings, you got to find out, right? You got to say, what can I do to keep Detroit away from this really good player?
And now you've got me picturing in my head Andrew Van Ginkel, Jonathan Grenard, and Zadarius Smith on the field at the same time.
On third down, right?
On third down, where they're just pinning their ears back and rushing the passer. That could be lethal.
I would like a defensive tackle. The problem is there aren't that many of them. So
Right.
if it does come to get it, and the other thing is too, Van Ginkel has definitely slowed down a bit over the last few weeks. And I wonder if he's banged up. I mean, I think he's playing through it, but it doesn't seem like he's got the same burst rushing the passer. And he missed a tackle last night that I don't think he usually misses. I wonder about the workload that they put on his back to get to those first 5 wins, that maybe they do need another person. And look, if you're playing Patrick Jones that much, that role is there. You just have to get somebody better. So that might be a surprise thing that they do. And then we'll all go, but what about Dallas Turner? They played Dallas Turner at linebacker last night. They were moving him all over the place. That seems to be the role they think he's going to have. David says, if it is a key and needed defensive position with years built into the contract, then you need to do it now. It's like free agency comes early as opposed to being outbid next year. That's also the way that I look at it. I know that it's different than just signing a player because you're giving up draft capital. I know that it's different from drafting a player because there's that big advantage when it comes to the rookie contract. It's just that the Vikings have some of those players. And if Turner does become a great player, then that's a $25 million or $20 million surplus value between that player and what you'd actually be paying. It's not exactly the same as a quarterback, but it's the similar advantage. The same with Addison. If Addison was a free agent right now, someone's giving him $20 million a year and you're getting him for his rookie deal. So they do have some of those guys on the roster right now that are helping them manage this salary cap situation. They've set up deals too that, see, the Vikings haven't been pushing these buttons lately like the Saints did for so long. The kick the money down the road. They have not been using that because they haven't really been in their winning window. They're trying to fix the cap. But in the next couple of years, with Jefferson's contract, O'Neill's contract, players like that, Grenard, they will be able to use some of those things to create even more space. So I think that that's a major factor in the conversation. Mike says, maybe I'm crazy, but wouldn't using our draft capital and cap space to finally solidify the O-line be great for a rookie quarterback? It would. The trouble is whom becomes available. I'm all about this. After seeing what the Lions have done with their line, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've never been against a great line, but I mean, this is just, you see the impact, the tangible impact of how they run, how they protect their quarterback. Who's trading you an above average guard? Like, who's going to be better than Reisner that you can acquire? I mean, maybe you just take all the Jaguars offensive linemen, Brandon Sheriff maybe too, but I think he may have been banged up. Of course I like it. I just don't know who it is that you're getting. There's a lot more names out there defensively.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like, and the offensive line is hard to figure out because it's one of the hardest positions to like trade for, to get like a real. I mean, they got Cam Robinson, which is good, and they got him for a pretty low price at a premium position. But if you're trying to find like a guard that can really like be, to your point, like something better than Dalton Reisner, that's going to be hard. You're probably better served finding that guy in free agency, if he's even available in free agency. And then you're going to have to, cough up some dough to bring him in, because you would need a guy like that. And then, but the flip side to that is, okay, if you use a draft pick to fill that position. If you use that first round pick, you might be waiting 2 or 3 years for that guy to develop and then to find out if he's really going to be part of your future. So it's all of this stuff. There's not really like a one size fit all in terms of like how you do this. You just have to avoid the really like dumb decisions, where if you're paying your quarterback top 5 quarterback money and he's like the 12th best quarterback in the league, and then you're digging in the bargain bin to try and find guards and they're not really that good. And in order for your quarterback to be good and win at a high level, you need those guards to be good. I don't know.
Just
Maybe
for example, you
I'm
mean,
just
yeah.
throwing out an example, maybe, but yeah, so it's a tough way to do things, but you just have to find a way to do it. And I don't think that there's like one perfect way to do it. Some of it just might have to get lucky too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how about like a Wyatt Teller? Didn't Buffalo let him go and then he became elite at another place? That's another way the Vikings have found offensive linemen in the past. Joe Berger, just a guy for somebody else and then works out for you, or looking for someone who's on the upswing of their development curve that a team has kind of given up on. The one thing the Vikings have never done is taken that kind of mass approach of let's bring in 4 guys in free agency and let them fight it out and see who ends up winning those jobs. And I think they've also struggled sometimes with chemistry and can pay dividends. But the Vikings have an offensive line you can win with. I mean, that's the key. Once they got Cam Robinson, I know it's frustrating, the interior still needing help. And O'Connell referenced that today, that he felt like the interior needed help. Brandel has slipped over the last few weeks. This is his first full season yet, so I think he's had a little bit of trouble there. We know Bradbury's strengths and weaknesses. He was great in run blocking last night, and we don't give him credit for that very often, but that's his strength. And then on the right guard, has still, even after a good night last night, still at the bottom of the league in terms of the metrics for evaluating offensive linemen. But if this is the weakest you're going to be, Sam Darnold was maybe pressured on 30% of his dropbacks last night. It's not catastrophic. It's winnable. It's not like it was in 2018 or something where you had 3 guys that were your weaknesses. Robinson made it so now you really don't have a major weakness there. Matt B says, any chance Kwesi tries to throw a Caleb Evans in on a pick? Seems like he's always a healthy scratch lately. Yeah, they have given up on a Caleb Evans. That is quite clear. I think if you're another team, you should be looking at a Caleb Evans for some conditional pick or something. But when a team gives up on a guy, pretty hard to make a case for getting anything for him. But could you sweeten the pot on a deal? We'll give you this draft pick, and how about this player who's still pretty young? Yes, and I think they should. I think he could play in the NFL. I just don't think he could play for this system in Brian Flores.
Yeah, we've seen that happen before. You talked about it with guys like on the offensive line that maybe things just didn't work out at his first stop and just needs a change of scenery, and it ends up working out for that player. I mean, that might be the case for Caleb Evans, where this guy who has talent, guy that I was really intrigued by, a couple of years ago. It just hasn't really worked out for him here. And it might just be a thing where he just needs to go somewhere else, maybe get in a different system, get in a different locker room, a different environment, and maybe that team can figure out what to do with him. But I mean, if he's healthy and he's not seeing the field other than, maybe occasionally on special teams, yeah, I mean, it seems to make some sense to if you're trying to make a move and you can kind of toss him in as sort of a secondary piece to sweeten the deal a little bit, I think you got to do it.
Malkill says, can we put the kibosh on Kwesi cannot draft? Did you see number 3 last night? Now, what you have to remember, you're breaking the rules. So the rules are when Jordan Addison is frustrating, then Kwesi drafted him. When he does something good, then O'Connell drafted him. That's been the rules of this chat when talking about this for the last couple of years. Also, Dallas Turner's 4 pressures had some people in shambles a little bit last night as well. The trouble with the Kwesi draft thing is that he hasn't gotten 100 draft picks to see if he's good at it or not. He's gotten like 13. The 2022 draft was a bunch of players that were picked for Ed Donatel that didn't work out, and a starting guard who hasn't been good but has started a heck of a lot of games for you. What do you make of that one? We used to evaluate offensive linemen. This is how bad it used to be, by starts, and just say, well, the guy, he's a starter. So you did well enough with that draft pick. So if that was years ago, that's how it would have been. But yeah, they haven't had a ton of success in the draft. But if your picks are Turner and Addison that work out, well, that's much more important than whether Ty Chandler ends up working out or not. So didn't the Lions build their line through the draft? They did, but one of the players that they picked was with a top 5 draft pick, Penei Sewell. You're not expecting to have a top 5 draft pick anytime soon. They also got Kevin Zeitler, was a big pickup for them. Frank Ragnow was another first-round draft pick. And this is the draft randomness. The Vikings pick Garrett Bradbury as their center. He's been okay. No, I don't have a beef with Garrett Bradbury as much as other people do. Oh, the sound is cutting out. I'm sorry, guys. We're just about to wrap up anyway. I'm sorry that it's gone glitchy. I don't know why that might be, but just to wrap up the point is the Vikings, I know for a fact, loved Frank Ragnow. They didn't get a chance to pick him. They end up picking Garrett Bradbury. It doesn't work out quite as well. Like that's how the draft goes sometimes. What do I grade Turner for yesterday? I thought he did great. PFF had him as a 71. That's fine with me. All right, so let's end on this then, Manny. Your final thought for the Vikings for the trade deadline. How about this? Your prediction. What do you think the Vikings do at the trade deadline? And remember, you can be wrong because nobody will remember this after tomorrow, and there will be tomorrow night a trade deadline live show Tuesday night. So make sure you're tuning in for that. But your final prediction.
Well, my hope is that if they are going to move the first round pick, it is for somebody like I've been saying, like you've been saying, somebody that's going to be around for a while. That's fairly young and on a good contract and is going to be a part of your future as well, and it can also help you right now. I don't think that they're actually going to do that, though. I think they're going to do something. But I think it's going to be more of, the type of move like for Cam Akers. It's going to be kind of a depth guy. I'll say it's going to be a corner. I think they're going to find a depth guy for, at corner for like a 5th round pick, maybe. I think just interior defensive line, like you were saying, it's just harder to find those guys. It's harder to make a move for those type of guys. But I think if they address either one of those positions just from a depth standpoint, I'd be good with that. And it kind of seems to me like if they do make a move, it's going to be something more like that than sort of the big splash.
Sorry, Penei Sewell, 7th overall pick. You get my point. I agree. I think that there will be more conditional somethings to draft picks that are sent out for tomorrow. I know that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah likes to cook. I know that he likes to explore every and any possible trade under the sun. That's for sure. But I don't know that the opportunity is going to be there for the huge trade. And I think there's a ton of opportunity for the small trade. So maybe 2. That I'll predict that 2 smaller trades that solidify this roster. 1 for a kicker and 1 for a long snapper. No, I'm just kidding. You can find those guys. We'll have to keep an eye on what happens there as well. So, Manny, you and I will be back on Thursday night. We will know at that point, and we will preview the Jaguars. And this is going to be a really fun one. Your top 5 favorite Jaguars on Thursday night. I've definitely got some thoughts on that. One of my favorite teams back in the 90s and early 2000s. So thanks, everybody, for watching/listening. And we will talk to you again on Thursday night. We'll catch y'all later. Football.